Now that it's official, we're going to talk about Klay Thompson and more in this Monday's episode of your Heat Latest on FanArc. Welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm your host, Sam Shapiro. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet on YouTube, stop what you're doing right now. Click that subscribe button. We have great daily content you don't want to miss all right here, Monday through Friday. Well, at the end of last week, Shams broke what Miami had been waiting to hear all summer long as Dallas had agreed to buy out sharpshooter Klay Thompson. And that Thompson at the time planned to sign with Miami, roughly a $13 million deal over the course of 2 years. That became official after Thompson cleared waivers yesterday. I think it ended up being for roughly $11.5 million. Klay reportedly gave back roughly $10 million of his 2026-27 salary to secure a buyout from the Dallas Mavericks. That was according to Michael Scotto. Either way, Miami finally gets the sharpshooter they've wanted all along in Klay Thompson. And quite honestly, I think a lot of people are just as, if not more, excited for this signing than they were in comparison to Giannis. That's not me personally saying that I am, but Miami actually getting Klay does rank pretty close to me in terms of how excited I am, in terms of how excited I was when Miami got Giannis versus how I would say my excitement kind of ranks in terms of now that Miami has gotten Klay Thompson. Whether you want to say this isn't a good pickup for Miami because Klay is washed or whatever, the guy's fourth all-time in league history over career three-pointers made, and he shot 40 to 41% from three over the course of his career. Okay, yes, he's coming off a down year with Dallas. Regardless, he's going to be a pain in the butt for opposing defenses to have to worry about on the perimeter. Also, having Klay for Miami allows Hardaway to now come off the bench. And I think since Hardaway has proven himself to be a quality sixth man for the Nuggets, having him be the sixth or seventh guy in the rotation for Miami, I think could be very interesting. I think it's likely he plays the most impactful basketball with Miami in that sixth man type of role. But I like him in the starting lineup on nights where Klay isn't necessarily available to start. This kind of brings me to the key issue I feel that Klay now joining the Miami Heat addresses the most, and that is spacing. We had talked about how spacing and outside shooting and all of that jazz was going to be something to worry about for Miami going into this regular season. Well, now if you break down some of the outside scoring that at least could be in store for Miami now with Klay in the mix, the Heat have 7 players in their lineup that can shoot at least 37% or better from three. Bobby Portis shot 45.6% last season. Hardaway Jr., 40.7%. Wiggins, 41.4%. Thompson coming off a down year, 38.8%. Simone Fontecchio, 37.5%. Davion Mitchell, 39.5%. And then Myron Gardner, 40.6%. So as you just heard me rattle off some of these guys' three-point field goal percentages, most of these guys even shot better than Klay Thompson last year. So adding a guy like Thompson, one of the best all-time three-point shooters in NBA history, adding a guy like that to the equation here is going to be great for Miami. I don't want to come out right and say that it's going to completely solve all of Miami's spacing problems, but I think the outside scoring is definitely going to be less of a worrisome issue, or at least the spacing will be, than a lot of people are predicting. I think and the reason why I still have some worries here is consistency. I think if some of these guys can step up how consistently they are able to shoot the outside ball, that definitely might mitigate some of the worry there. I think if Wiggins can be more consistent from three, he could be a problem for opposing defenses. He was pretty inconsistent to start the year and kind of in the middle of the season, and then I would say I feel like all throughout really the course of the entire season, he had spurts where he had a couple games where he shot the ball very well, put up a higher scoring input than I feel like we normally see. Instead of roughly 15 points per game, we saw closer to 25 points per game. So I think if the consistency with him there, he still shot the ball roughly 41% from the field last year, and this is, in my opinion, off a relatively not very consistent season for him. That's not to say he was absolutely horrible, but if he could definitely play more consistently and at least shoot the outside ball more so, then I think he would definitely be a more threatening two-way player to deal with. Same deal with Fontecchio. If he could end the year how he started it, he could definitely be a problem on the wing and in the corners. Again, Clay is one person and won't solve all the problems overnight, but if he shoots even better than he did last year, and those other guys I had mentioned also shoot more consistently throughout the season, Fontecchio and Wiggins, that I think would be amazing in terms of contributing to what this spacing issue is could potentially look like, and definitely could not be as big of an issue as it's being made out to be. Again, I think it will take both. These guys shooting consistently and Clay shooting better than he did last year. But I think it's going to, again, take both of these to really come to fruition, to really not have a lot of these outside scoring issues that are being predicted actually be something that Miami is going to have to deal with this year. My point in trying to bring all this up is I at least think now with Clay in the picture, the idea of how Miami is going to space the floor and their outside scoring is definitely looking like less of a daunting task that Miami is going to have to deal with trying to get under control this season. It might not be as much of a worry that I think a lot of people are predicting. But while I would say all of this is great, Miami needs to figure out still how they're going to fill out the rest of their roster here, as the Heat still need to sign one more player to a standard contract if they want to sign Exhibit 10 tryout players for training camp. To do that, again, they're going to need to have 14 guys under standard deals before they can go and sign those players. DeMar DeRozan's officially not an option anymore, as he also signed with Denver at the end of last week. I've already talked about how I don't think that would be a good fit for not just Miami, but also for him anyway, and I think Denver would be a better fit for DeRozan in terms of what he wants. Also happy to see him go out west. We don't need to make the East any more competitive than it already is. But this at least puts some pressure on the Heat to make a move sooner rather than later, now that they have Clay, and then once they add another guy, they can start really looking at what guys they want to have that they could potentially bring over for training camp, maybe be part of this kind of battle. I think the 15th spot's going to remain left open just for flexibility purposes, but hey, maybe you decide you want to bring in one of those guys on a two-way deal. You've still got one of those options left there. Maybe you decide that the Vlad Golden experiment's over and you flip one of these guys in training camp in exchange for Golden's deal. I've most recently seen Barry Jackson, though, in the Miami Herald report that Miami prefers to use their 14th roster spot on a big man, center or power forward. Still seems to me that Nick Richards is one of the top targets Miami's keeping in mind. Wiseman is also a guy that I had mentioned last week that's also on the free agency market. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami continues to take their time to see if other guys get waived before the waive and stretch deadline on the 29th. But I think if Miami's going to grab Richards, they should do it sooner rather than later. There's mutual interest between Miami and Nick Richards, but Barry Jackson also confirms that the Heat are not the only team interested in the big men. There are actually a couple of others in the mix. Specifically, there are rumors out there that the Knicks are one of the other teams that are interested, but the Heat, I think, honestly could offer him a more important or bigger primary backup center role than the Knicks could. The Knicks just got Andre Drummond, so Richards would pretty much get guaranteed the third-string center spot, obviously playing behind Drummond and Karl Anthony Towns, versus Miami, still no true five. You're essentially playing behind Bam, Giannis, and Portis, who are really all kind of sort of true fours. Bam, obviously, you're going to plug in the five in that kind of situation. So I guess in that case, Richards is really looking at a backup center spot if he decides to sign with Miami. So, but Jackson ultimately kind of made it seem like at this point in time, the ball's in Nick Richards' court, and it's ultimately, at this point, up to what he wants to do. Now, rounding out the rest of today's episode, I'm sure that we're going to talk about other free agent targets that Miami can continue to look at now with kind of the clock ticking towards the start of the NBA regular season. Honestly, vastly approaching. I can't believe the summer's almost over already. But, I mean, there's still plenty of targets on the board besides Nick Richards that Miami could ultimately go after. I think right now, in terms of wants and needs, I think I'm going to talk about what I think Miami should really do. I would say in terms of filling out the rest of their roster. Now that you've got Clay, you talked about how you want a big, and you talked about how you want a point guard. I think go and get your true big man in Nick Richards, and use your last two-way deal to sign Keshad Johnson. The Heat have another two-way deal open, so if they don't want to necessarily pull the plug on the Vlad Golden experiment yet, they don't have to do that. But because Johnson's name continues to get thrown around from what I've been seeing, it seems likely that Johnson kind of has his name all over the final two-way deal at this point. But the reason why I haven't really, or personally I don't think why we're seeing guys like Gabe Vincent or Bruce Brown be mentioned nearly as much in discussions of players that could potentially be added by Miami, like a Nick Richards or somebody like that, is because I really think Miami is investing in the Trey Donaldson developmental project. I really think they believe he is going to be a contributing backup point guard for them, at least at some point this season, if not this year, definitely next year. I think they believe he's going to be a player that they can use at some point this year, if not this year, definitely next year. And look, I like Donaldson, and I think he will be that player eventually at some point. But I also wouldn't be upset if Miami still found a way to pick up Gabe Vincent. I would personally rather see Miami go for a guy like Vincent on a standard deal instead of a Kelly Olynyk or a Drew Eubanks. I mean, Miami definitely said they still need a big, but if they miss out on Richards, those are some guys that they could look at as well. I think in the scenario, though, where you're looking at how Miami's viewing Donaldson, potentially a guy that they can use in their rotation going forward, then I think how their priority list might rank at this point in time is you get Richards, and then you already have Donaldson, that backup point guard, already in your system that you've been developing. So then what's the point in shopping for a point guard if you've already got one in the kitchen that you're really trying to spruce up at that point in time? So in that scenario where you develop Donaldson and you sign Richards, then you're getting your best of both worlds there. You're getting your backup point guard and you're getting your backup center rather than signing a backup point guard and then developing another point guard. Drop in the comments what you guys think Miami should do, because personally, if it were me, I think Miami should go for Nick Richards and see how the Trey Donaldson development project ultimately works out. I like him as well. Also wouldn't be upset to see Miami sign Vincent. I honestly would prefer that if they miss out on Richards, that they go for Vincent instead of looking at some of these other veteran big men that could potentially be in the cards to get signed by Miami. But I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this as well. Drop in the comments how you would fill out the rest of Miami's roster. And that's going to do it for this Monday's episode of your Heat Latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Hope you guys have an awesome start to your week.